armed guards at his gate, armed with guns. So they would be there. Sometimes they would sit down. They had chairs, sofa chairs like that. They would sit there, and sometimes when in attendance, they'd stand up and salute when the master of the house goes up. But they had formed a habit that even when we came out of our gate, they would stand up in attendance and salute, in attention. And I would feel very happy, and I will just nod on behalf of Baba. But I took it that they saluted to me, So, and I was a boss also, because I am driving the boss of the world. So that's how man feels, mind is there. So I was very happy and felt comforted that at least there is somebody who is in attendance, and salutes me. So it was going on like that. For many weeks it went on, months. Now he had the pleasure to establish a mast ashram there. So we are now busy, and he made me in charge of it. I had to live there with them, with the musts. So all that driving business and all that gone from my hands. Somebody else took up. Elizabeth may have taken the driving. I don't know even what was happening now in the world, because I was in a different world with them. One day it so happened, but whenever I would go also on foot and all that, sometimes Baba would send me out, so I would go and they would stand up and salute, and I would return the salute, like that, with one finger. Beware. Now what happened one day, as the musts were there and all that, so Baba would attend to the cleaning of the latrines, the night soil he would clean with his own hands. Wash the toilets and all that sort of thing, bathe them then, and clothe them, and feed them, and everything would be there. So the first thing would be to clean the night soil. So when there were 6 of them, it was all right. We had one toilet. In India, at that time, there was no such thing as what you call that sewage system. It was just an open gutters, but nice, clean and all that. But the toilets would be there. And we had to squat on it, and we had to drop our droppings there, in a big pan which could be drawn and then cleaned, and that was the duty of the scavengers. We had scavengers, we used to have and we still have. But Baba used to do that for the musts. He would clean them. And I used to help him. So every morning, first thing he would come, he would do this. So it was all right when there were 6 of them, but then gradually the number increased. So naturally the pan that was there used to get full. So when it used to get full, he used to tell me that, don't you see that it's getting full? Can't you create another? There was another toilet. You open the other toilet, but I said there is no tin. Then get it in. Yes, Baba, that's right. I'll get it in. Because, it becomes so overfull, it's very difficult to lift it. He had to lift it and then empty it in another bucket and all that sort of thing, and then wash it and clean it. So then while emptying it, it would all spill and all that. It's common sense. So he says, haven't you any common sense? Get another pan and open the other latrine and because there are people, number has increased. So I said, all right. But all right means what? 2 days passed by. And I completely forgot about it. Because Baba always kept us busy, round the clock, so I forgot. So 3rd day he comes and says, still you have not done it. So he told me to go and get it. Go and get it now. So I still remember that there was a vacant pan there. You see, in our Mandali quarters, not many Mandali people were living. So we had quite a number of latrines there, and there were pans there. So what I did was, he ordered me to go immediately. I jumped over the wall. I ran across, and got into my compound, into our gate of the Palace Road, Mandali quarters. And when I went there, when I passed there, although I was running, the man stood up and saluted me. So I saluted like that. And it was the usual routine. So I went inside, and I had to run, because Baba is waiting there. So I came back with a dripping pan, from the latrine, and running with my hands. So I see this man getting up there to salute me, but seeing that, this fellow is this, and all the years, all the months that I was, so he sat down. I noticed that, we exchanged the thoughts inwardly, and that was a great humiliation. I still remember that. You see. And from that day onwards, he never saluted me. So such type of effacement, process of effacement take place, you see, like that. And apart from that, you see, the inward processes take place about our ego, about our anger, our greed, our lust, and all these things are there. Yeah, these are all manifested things, but there are other internal things also, gradually efface. Yeah, they efface us.
When some negative part of you comes outside and you try to resolve that by reasoning, and the process may last 3-4 days, and you find yourself helpless, somehow it's there. It's so profound that you cannot efface it. What is happening really?
The thing is that we know through our reason that we should efface that negative side of ours, you see, but still we try our best. So we have to continue. We have to continue, try and try and try and try and try. Yeah. Implore him to help us out and all that inwardly. We have to. It cannot go just by the asking. Nothing happens. Nothing happens just by asking. Even this morning I was saying, that well, His grace is there. We say by His grace such a thing happened, and by His graces and all that. And the law of grace prevails, no doubt about it. If the law of grace was not, active, there's something called law of grace, you know that? Yeah. Without His grace, we wouldn't be. We wouldn't be breathing and alive and thinking and having good fun and this and that and sitting, and everything is nothing but because of His grace. The grace continuously flows, no doubt about it. And we implore for His more grace and still more grace and still more we want it and all that sort of thing. But it is there. But what we fail is that apart from imploring for His grace, requesting, begging Him to bestow His grace upon us, we forget one thing, that we forget to beg of Him to give us the container to withhold the grace. We want the grace, but have we ever implored Him to give us that container which can hold it, which will not allow it to sieve through? Yeah. So that's how it is. So gradually, through our reason, even through our imploring, through our begging Him, asking Him, we will ask Him. He goes on helping us, no doubt about it. His grace is always flowing through us. But we forget that we are not asking Him to give us, make us true vehicles through which we can live for Him. But we want to be our own. And yet we become the beggars. When the time comes, when we have the appetite, we come at the door to beg. And when our appetite is satisfied, we go away. You follow? That's the figure. So every time we have to implore Him, whether we have the appetite or not. Yeah. Then that we create that vessel. He bestows upon us the grace to have that vessel. And then the grace is there. You can contain it. That's all. So it takes time. It takes time. Try now, so that he can repeat and profit thereby. So this is what, at that time, of course, there was no such thing as Meher Baba and Ahmednagar or anything of that sort. So he says, well, there is no better mantra than Ahmednagar.
Who said that?
Upasni Maharaj said that. Ahmednagar? So yeah, don't you know that there is a city called Ahmednagar, a town? He says, yes. That is the best mantra, Ahmednagar. Ahmednagar? Yeah, Ahmednagar. Repeat Ahmednagar. So that fellow repeated Ahmednagar. So when Maharaj, then the man left in astonishment. Of course, he couldn't refuse him. He continued. He may have continued. I don't know who the person was. But after he left, he says, does he realize how difficult it is? You said that, no? Yeah. How difficult it is, How is it possible? Aham means ego. Nakar means don't assert your ego. That is the, Aham mad nagar. Nagar is there, but there is a pun on the word, you see. Aham means ego. Assertion of ego shouldn't be there. Nakar means don't do it. Don't assert your ego. These people, they drive us crazy. And as I told you all last time, that here we make a good pair, Sometimes when I provoke him, then he gets into a story, then he provokes me, and I get into a story, and that's how we pass our hours over here. Put it by. You want more? Do you want a little more? In a little while. A little while afterwards. But not with this ice cold water. You want ice cold water?
Either way is fine.
On the subject,
Yes.
that we are discussing now, of Charlie and Lady Diana.
No, nothing on those lines.
What, Hafiz has not said something?
Gee?
Hafiz has not said something about that?
Yes, but such things don't come to my mind now. But this morning I told one story at our Baba's tomb after the Aarti. And this has to do something with that effacement question that was asked.
But then, where is Bruce?
He's outside.
Maybe Bruce has already heard this
Oh,
story.
Bruce has heard.
No, I am not
He has
sure.
heard. He has heard. Yeah. Maria, listen to the story. Yeah. Did you eat your lunch or not?
Yes, I can hear better.
No, but did you eat your lunch? Chalo.
Even after the effacement, this sometimes the brusqueness and that the authority and all that persist, and that reminded me of Bahuddin Naqshband, the one who established the Naqshbandi order. And he was very, like our Upasni Maharaj. He didn't care a hoot about what other people thought. He would just straight away he would give it. And he didn't hesitate even using abusive words if he was really angered.
You loudly see all these people, who can't hear you properly, they have to come closer to you.
So one day a group of wise people in that area, I forget the name of that place in Iran where he had established his ashram. So this group of wise people came to pay their respects to the master. And suddenly they found that in the ashram there was all laughing and humor and yelling and screaming. Absolutely, the atmosphere was not what the ashram's atmosphere should be. And the master was in a very happy mood. And they noticed
Master
that...
means Bahuddin.
Bahuddin, yes. And they noticed that not only that, but the master was cracking jokes, which is not, they're not supposed to be cracked in society and things like that. So this group of wise people...
On Lady Diana and Charlie.
So they were most upset about it, and they felt that, well, we'll leave this place. It's useless paying homage or obeisance to such a man, irrespective of what the town says about him. But then some of the wise people thought that, no, we must give him a piece of our mind. This is not the way to behave in an ashram like, and misleading his own innocent disciples. So they went in and they gave him a right firing, and they said that we are most disappointed. We came here to pay our respects to you, and here we find you cracking smutty jokes and making your disciples laugh and all that. And Bahuddin said, come on, get out, get out. So they all left, because after all that authority was still there. Then after a month or so, again having nothing better to do, they decided, well, we'll again go and see what is happening. So this time the whole atmosphere was very quiet, very peaceful, and each one felt that this is all the result of that firing we gave him. and they came in, and Bahuddin said, okay, now sit down, all of you. Then he said, this also shows the difference between our Lord and the other masters. Here total democracy prevailed, as Eruch so many times said. But I used to read in these books that without the order of the master or the permission of the master, a disciple could never speak or address his master or anyone. Such stringent laws were there. So, just goes to show what God can do and what a perfect master does. So Bahuddin gave an order to the youngest murid, and one of this wise man had a book written in Turkish language. And Bahauddin said to this young man, he says, the youngest murid stand up. So he stood up. And Bahauddin said, do you know the Turkish language? He says, no. So Bahauddin said, now recite the book that this man has in his hands. And the young man recited the whole book without having ever read it or even knowing the language. And all of them were totally surprised. After the whole thing was over, Bahauddin asked that young man, well, what did you feel during this recitation? He says, Master, nothing. I don't still understand what it was. You told me to recite and I recited. And Bahauddin said, sit down. Then Bahauddin turned to the wise people and he said to them that the first occasion when you saw me making my disciples laugh and be merry was because the atmosphere in the ashram had become very grim and solemn, and that was not needed at that time. So I had to revive it with humor and laughter. This time when you came, the humor and the laughter side had exceeded a bit beyond limit, so I had to bring them down to the level of sobriety. So this time it was all sort of meditation and quiet and all that. And then he said that only when you feel within yourself that nothingness which that young murid exhibited now, only then can you really enter the path. And as a parting shot, he told the wise people that words from a perfect master to the effect that you stand a chance have more meaning than you wise people complimenting each other that you are the wisest man in the world. Now all of you please leave my ashram and make sure never come again. That's how he...
What was the last shot he said?
He said that words from a perfect master to the effect, to a new murid, to the effect that you stand a chance, that means the chance of entering this path, have more meaning than you wise people complimenting each other that you are the wisest man in the world.
What was his name?
Bahauddin Naqshband. And Farhad Shafa told me that that group of dervishes still continue. Yeah. And at present they have a murshid, enlightened or not, I do not know, but very old, venerable sort of a man. He even gave me the name of that village, which recently came into picture when this Iran-Iraq war came up. I think that village has now been destroyed.
Yeah, and it's in Allahabad, has that book on recent Persian Sufi saints. One of them,
Sanandaj.
one of them is the photograph of the head of the Naqshbandi.
The name of the village I now remember, Sanandaj. That's where this order was established.
I think it's the most flourishing order in Iran.
Maybe.
Flourishes there.
Then the other nice story that you told this morning,
Which one?
your translation after, who sang this one?
That,
About tea.
tea.
No, it was Rhoda sang, and then Ted gave the translation, and then I think this was the one that you said when Baba heard. Oh, yes, it was.
Simab.
Yeah, yes.
Simab. Simab was the one who had written that ghazal.
That had written that, yeah.
And in 54, after
See,
that
he was
ghazal,
telling all these stories.
54, Baba, end of the ghazal, spontaneously announced to the people all around, his lovers sitting at his feet, that at this moment I have given liberation to Simab. And yet Simab had died many years back.
So on what lines?
That, ab kya batao
Yeah,
main
but
kaha.
do you all know?
Yes, I gave them the translation of that ghazal.
No, but tell them that episode that some kawals were in presence of Baba.
I told you, listen, morning, immediately after that I said that story of the same 54, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Were you there?
It was tea time.
But she is not there at tea time.
She was not.
We weren't there either.
In the morning you were not? No.
They had gone for shopping. She doesn't want to have tea, and he was too sleepy, and she of course lives 6 miles away. So what was it? Tell that little joke of
Baba's humor it was.
It's
But,
a good one.
yeah.
That's a good one.
The first incident of humor that happened to me was in 54 Satara. I'd just come back to India and Baba called me to Satara and I was sitting at his feet. The rest of the Mandali were there. And suddenly he says, "Do you know me?" So I said, "Yes, Baba, I know you." Then he turns around to the Mandali and says, "Look, just now he has come and he knows me, and here are people 30 and 40 years. So I said, "No, I don't know you in that sense. I know you are God, that is all." So this was the afternoon tea time, and the Kaval was singing, and suddenly my attention was drawn to this Kaval because he kept on repeating certain lines. The English version of that would go that, "If you cannot quench my thirst, don't declare yourself to be ocean-hearted." And because he repeated, I wanted to see now what response Baba would give to these lines. So I was all attention. Unfortunately for the singer and for me, it so happened that the tea was being served at that time. And just at that moment, when he kept repeating the line for the maybe third time or so, he reached the singer. And Baba snapped his fingers and stopped the whole proceeding and said, "2 cups of tea to this man, he's very thirsty." So it was
Very thirsty.
Well, why do you say unfortunately?
well, I mean, we were eager to hear, no? I
Because
wanted to know.
when the beloved gets provoked, then he gives out something different, you see. This was just a,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
it was a sort of a, the bubble had blown, the balloon had blown to a big size now because of his repeated singing and pinpricks to the beloved. You see that we are beholden to you and we have lived a life, you see, that you wanted us to live, and we did this for you and we did that for you and we followed you and all that,
And
and we are so thirsty here. And don't then, proclaim yourself to be the ocean if you can't even quench our little thirst that we have and all that. And he went on, we are thirsty and we are thirsty like that. So naturally he was provoked, so he would have had another opportunity to say something in reply to that. Baba used to do that always. But instead the tea man came. So I said, all right, he's very thirsty, give him 2 cups of tea.
Oh, he found a way out.
Yeah, he found the way out, yeah. Maybe his thirst was just for 2 cups of tea, that's all. That was in his lot. Yeah, this comes to my mind because of this. There's another story, you see. But where is this man gone?
He's doing some other recording.
Again.
He's going to copy that other tape.
So
and
then again he'll come and ask,
copy
be careful, he'll see your tape recorder, he'll say. Now the story is this. This is what Baba told us, this story. You know, Baba has been telling us quite often about Maya. You know what Maya is? What is it?
Illusion.
Yeah, principle of ignorance, Baba said that. It's the principle behind ignorance, this illusion that we call it. So, we have to keep away from it. We shouldn't allow it to have a grip over us. And so often Baba makes us beware of illusion, beware of Maya. So likewise, in every Advent he tells that. Every Advent he repeats the same thing. So at the time of Muhammad, he was saying that also, that all this is nothing. Means it's nothing. All this is nothing. Reality is quite different and all that sort of thing. And they have been hearing and they naturally, very lovingly accept what he says. It's but natural. But what happened one day, there was a child like Sophie. And of course it has nothing to do with Sophie. It so happened that Muhammad loved the child very much. Very much. And in midst of the most solemn occasions, you see, the child would come, child is after all child, would come and just run hither and thither, and somebody would want to check the child. Mama says, don't check the child, let it be. Sometimes the child would come and jump on his lap and all that, or go on his back and have it ride over his shoulder and so forth and so on. So the Lord allowed him to have the privilege. Child's privilege is there. The child died all of a sudden. After a little sickness, the child died. So there is naturally in the household a lot of crying and wailing and mourning. So Mama says, what's the matter? This child died. Says, get the child on my lap. So they brought the child on and put it on his lap. And Mama looked at the child and remembered its pranks and all that. What it was, I don't know. But then all the Mandalis that are seated, they are also there, and thoughts surge, you see. So, well, Muhammad himself used to say that be not attracted to this illusory existence, this, that, and all that. And very soon, tears started trickling down his cheeks, the Lord's cheeks, and they were falling on the cheek of the child, you see, while he was playing with that dead body. And those people who were around there, well, they were amazed as the Lord is so much attached to this child, that so much so that he weeps for him and all that. And he tells us not to be attached. But there must be something in the child. Means they were confused, in short. And after a while, he lifted the child and gave it to the mother, and mother wept bitterly and took it away and finished. The last rites were seen and it's all done. And that's the end of the whole episode. A couple of days passed by and all that sort of thing. And then again Muhammad remembered the child. Naturally the mind is working there, eh? Normal human mind has to work. Whether you be in the presence of the Lord or away from Him, the mind continues to work. So the mind was working at a rapid pace and emanating thoughts as to even the Lord is attached. Even he cannot, resist the temptation, and he wept and all that because he lost the child and all that. You see, the mind is. And the Lord knew about it all. So after a couple of days, he brought in the topic again, that we missed that baby, and so forth and so on. He says, yeah, it was nice fun to have the child here playing and all that. And then he said that, well, these children are like flowers in my garden and we miss, you see. And of course, but the flower wilts, so the child has to pass away and all that. And that day when I took the child on my lap, he himself has to bring out now to clear the doubts there, you see, in the minds. So you must have seen tears trickling down my cheek. So yes, we did see. So, yeah. It was so. But what can I do? I would want to give the child, because I love the child so much, I wanted to give something more. But it was in his fate only to have a couple of drops of my tears on its cheek. That was in its lot. So then they realized that. So there is such thing as in his share was just a couple of tears, you see, to be shed from the Lord. That's all. Why did we tell the story? What happened was in his share. Huh? Something happened. What brought about this? Huh?
Oh, the tea, the 2 cups of tea.
The 2 cups. It was in his share to have only 2 cups of tea. Yeah. He was so thirsty, his thirst was such that it equated to only 2 cups of tea. That was in his share. Had the thirst been quite different, real thirst, it would have been a different thing.
Was that Muhammad's child?
Pardon?
Was it Muhammad's child?
Yeah.
It was.
It was not Muhammad's child, but a woman had come. What is the story about it? A woman had come with a child. It had grown up. A woman surrendered to Muhammad and was kept in his harem and accepted as his wife. There were quite a few women, who were considered to be his wives.
About 8.
Huh?
8.
9 or 8?
13.
13, there were 13. Yeah.
But you know, supposedly he did have one child
Uh-huh.
by this woman named Maria the Cop.
Of course, the daughter was there.
Fatima.
Fatima was given to Ali.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. But this child was not his child.
Not his child.
It was his child, of course, but not. He didn't father the child. He was not. He had not fathered the child. But I think it was a Greek woman
Yes.
who came. I forget the name also. Who is going to see her? All right, get. Yeah, sometimes it occurs. I forgot it. It's a Greek young girl had come, taken refuge, and had a child. And that's how it was. And he was very fond of the girl as well as this child. They would play about. She was young too, and the child was young.
Whether you said it or
Ring, about the ring?
rings.
Yeah, tell her.
That also was very beautiful.
Loudly!
He had so many wives, you see, and these wives would quibble amongst themselves that, no, Muhammad loves me more than you and all that. And one fine day they decided to find out whom he really loves the most. So they approached him individually and said, Muhammad.
No, they were there in a
Yeah,
crowd.
yeah.
That Aisha emboldened herself, the young
Asked
one.
her.
Yeah, Aisha, yeah.
That whom do you love the most? And Muhammad said that tonight I'll give you the answer. And on that night he visited each of his wives and presented them with a ring and said,
Each one,
Each one,
separately, individually. Yeah.
I love you the most. And that's why this ring is a present from you, from me, and from my very heart. But one thing is, don't tell it to any of the other wives that I have, otherwise there'll be unnecessary fighting and disturbance in my work. And he did it the whole night to all the 13 of them. And every one of them was tickled pink that he loves me the most.
That reminds me of what you said the other day
And then,
about the men and women here.
Yeah. And then the next day Aisha said, tell us, whom do you love? Because Aisha was very fond, you see.
Yes.
She was also of that metal, She would want to ask questions and get answers and all, press him to give answers. He said, well, what can I say? All that I can say is that I love the one most to whom I have given a ring. And she felt very happy because she thought that she was the only one who was given the ring.
Then who was the beloved of Muhammad?
We all are his beloved.
No, but like Radha and
Khadija.
Yeah.
Khadija, yeah. But Aisha was close to him. Yeah, because of her frankness and her boldness and what do you call it, you see? Childlikeness. Yeah.
Wasn't she Abu Bakr's daughter?
Yeah. I read somewhere is this that it was mentioned in Hadith, which I haven't read Hadith, but some quotes were given from Hadith on this subject. So I read some once, and that was that there is an assembly of his lovers, means Mandali, close ones, seated there, and Ali one day asked him that you have been telling us all the time that you see Allah and you converse with Him, and it is Allah who gives you this Quran, and naturally then you speak out the Quran and we write down. So you have been seeing the Lord so often you have been seeing. Will it not be possible for us to see by your grace? Can I not see Him? So he just kept quiet. He had it appeared as if he had no answer. And then after a while, after a little pause of a minute or so, he said with a meaningful nod, he says, seeing me is seeing him. That's the only time where it is revealed. like that.
It was a thought, Eruch.
Hmm?
Imam Benjamin thought another. He thought that Muhammad is so very lucky he saw Allah.
He saw Allah, yeah.
And then Muhammad turned down to Allah, faced him and said, just keep looking at me and you will see Allah. It was only a thought.
And that's in the Hadith?
Yes, it's in the Hadith.
So that's the only place in whole of Islam where Muhammad reveals himself to his close ones in this.
In the scriptures.
Yeah, in his sayings. Scriptures, of course, Allah and Muhammad, the Prophet, are two different. All the time there's that shadow play goes on in Quran and all that sort of thing. Revelations and all that is nothing but a shadow play between Allah and the Prophet. But only once, when such thing had happened, there was that sentence.
And do you think that
Seeing,
private-
this is what I read, seeing me is seeing him. Hmm?
Do you think that in private, with lovers in private,
Yeah, he had,
there would have been...
yeah, he must have given out in private, surely.
I feel that, like, I always have questions, like when I'm at home, that I think I'd love to ask you.
Yeah.
And then when I get here, it seems so inappropriate.
That's right.
And I'm always at a loss. I never have anything to say to you.
And then when you go back home, you say, why didn't I answer?
How I wish the whole world is transformed.
Oh, right. Test it, 1, 2, 3.
In the summertime, there weren't many people who came to Mehrabad to the tomb because it was very hot. But people would come from Ahmednagar or from Erangaon or villages nearby for Baba's darshan and then go away. And one day, it wasn't particularly hot, but it was in the middle of the summer, in May, I think. I was up the hill, puttering around somewhere, and I saw a very odd-looking group approach the tomb. And one of them was a very old man who had white hair, and he was wearing a shawl as if a Muslim men wear a certain kind of shawl. And he struck me as being from North India, not from Maharashtra. And he was with a group of much younger people who looked like they were from Ahmednagar. I mean, or this area, they had the look of Maharashtrians. But I mean, I don't know that much about it, but this was just my impression. But he was very interesting looking, this old man. And he went up towards the tomb, and then I went off somewhere, and much later I came back to get something from Nana Kher, and this man was talking to Nana Kher. This is about half an hour later. And he said to Nana Kher, "Today is the second happiest day of my life." He was saying, as I heard him. He was speaking very good English, excellent English. And he must have been educated in a very high-class school, because his English was really extraordinary. And he was saying to Nana Kher, which was unusual, with his dress and everything, he didn't look like that type. But he was saying to Nana Kher, "Today is the second happiest day of my life, and the happiest day in 51 years. And Nana says, "That's because you feel as if you meet him again." And he said, "Yes." And then he was telling Nana was taking his address and his name and everything, and then I went away, but that was very, the whole thing was kind of interesting. And so then later on I came back, and as I was coming back, I saw him leaving with the group, and he was laughing and embracing one of these men from Ahmednagar, and he was saying to him, "Everything I owe to you." He said, "I owe everything to you. If it weren't for you, this wouldn't have happened to me." He said, "You don't know what I owe to you." And he was embracing this man. And then they went away. So, of course, not much is going on. There weren't a lot of movies or TV or anything. So this is really like a drama. This is really something to find out about. So I went over to Nana Kher, and he was sitting there alone, and I said, and he was talking to Janaki, and then he went away. So Janaki seemed to know what's going on. So I said, "Who is that old man?" And she said, Nana was just telling me about him. So then she thought it over. She did this and that, and then she thought over what the story was. She got it all collected in her mind, and she said, let me tell you the story. So then I sat down and she told the story. And the story from Nana's point of view was this, that this man arrived, went up to the tomb, went inside, took Baba's darshan, and began to weep. And he was there about 20 minutes, and he was weeping and weeping and weeping. And Nana was really struck because he had never seen him before. And finally he came out, he sat down, he recollected himself, and he told Nana this story. He said, I have met him, I meet him again after 51 years. And he said, when I was a young man, I lived in Quetta, which is now in Pakistan, isn't it? Yeah, but was India in those days.
It was the capital of Baluchistan in the British time.
Yeah, and this was during the time when the British ruled India. And he said, I lived in Quetta in 1929. He said, I was there. My father was the station master of Quetta, which in those days was a big post, and for his father to be station master, most of the station masters at that time were British. So his father, he must have been very well educated and must have educated his son also. And he said, I was a very young man, and one day in this year, 1929, I had gone to the north, about 7 hours away, to another station beyond Quetta. And I was on the platform of the train station, he said. And suddenly in a distance, I saw a figure that riveted my attention. And he was walking down the platform from a person. He said it was a person. And he was walking away from me. The person had long hair and a long gown, he said. And so attracted was I to that person that I thought it must be a woman, he said, because I was so attracted to the person. And it was from the back that I saw it. And I saw another person running up to him, running away, running up, running away. So I caught hold of that man. And I said, who is that? Is it a man or a woman? And he said, it's a man. And he's a master, and his name is Sri Meher Baba. And he said, can I meet him? He said, I wasn't interested in masters, I wasn't interested in God, but he said, all I could think of was that I had to meet this being. He said, and he had only seen him from the back. He said, can I meet him? And he said, I'll ask his permission, and I'll come and tell you stay here. So the disciple, whoever it was, went to Baba, ascertained his permission, and came back and told that man, he's given his permission for you to meet him. So the man went up, and Baba by this time was sitting down on a bench, and the man went up to him, and he didn't know anything to take his darshan or these things. He didn't know. He just stood, and Baba smiled at him, asked how he was and what his name was and where he lived and all these things. And he said, even as he was telling the story, Nanakar says, he became stunned while recalling this. And he said, I cannot possibly describe to you what he looked like at the time. He said, I was talking to him, but all I could do was gaze at him. He said, his hair was open and flowing out. He had a very serene look on his face. And he said, and around him, there was a glow. And then he stopped, and he said, no, glow is not the word for it. And he said, and then again he started to weep, the man in telling the story, and said, there are no words, he said, for what there was around him. And he looked at Nana, he said, do you understand? There are no words. And Nana said, I understand. So anyway, but Baba just went on talking to him. And then the man, finally when he could talk, he said, Baba, my family lives in Quetta, and I ask your permission, could we offer you lunch there? Because your train will go there. By this time he'd heard that Baba was coming from Persia into India through Quetta on the train. And that's why they were at the station. And he said, if I phone my father, who's the station master, then he'll arrange, and if we could offer you lunch, it would be a great blessing for us. And Baba said, all right. So he ran to the telephone, he phoned the station master, he phoned his father. He told his father a great man was coming, and his mother had to prepare something really delicious and in great quantity for the party, and And they said, all right.
They're great eaters.
They're great eaters. All of them are starving after wandering in the desert. But so then he got on the train. And when he was sitting on the train, he, this is real sweet. Baba was sitting up on the bench of the train. They were in third class, must have been.
Yeah.
And Baba was sitting up on the bench, and Baba had his feet out. He was sitting up on the bench, his feet were down on the ground, and he had his feet out sort of like this. And the man was sitting about where Craig would be, over there. And as the man was sitting, and he was down on the ground.
Who is Craig?
This Craig. Just here, this Craig.
Here is Craig.
Yeah. So he had his feet like this, and Craig was, the man was sitting there on the ground. And Baba was just chit-chatting with the Mandali. It wasn't like a darshan program. He was pretty much incognito in the trip. And so no one was around, you know. And he was just chatting with the Mandali and once in a while chatting with this fellow and all this. And the man was sitting there, and all he could feel was that he wanted to touch Baba's feet. He had this incredible, overwhelming desire to put his hands on Baba's feet because he hadn't touched Baba at all. Because it wasn't a formal situation, you know. And he was just looking at his feet and wanting to touch his feet, but he would never dare. Baba's personality was such he would never dare reach over and grab his feet. So he just sat quietly like this. And then suddenly, about midway through the journey, Baba suddenly seems to be very uncomfortable, and he shifts himself and he stretches like this, and he just pushes his feet out. And the feet come right up to this man. And this man realizes that Baba has done this for him. So very quietly he puts his hands on Baba's feet. And then he sits for the whole journey with his hands on Baba's feet. And so he's going, they're right, and then he forgets everything, he doesn't hear anything. But they're going along, and finally they get to Quetta, and at Quetta the man's mother comes with this huge bagula, or a vessel, full of pulao. And pulao
"Oh," she said, "Anthony," she said, "there's a very nice, charming American here who's been looking for you. He's an officer, a naval officer, and he's gone back to the base, I think." So I rushed in. I thought this was very exciting. She didn't say any more than that, and I rang the base. She gave me his name because he told her his name. So I rang the base and said, "Is Lieutenant Flick there?" "No," they said, he's out somewhere. So that was no good. But I didn't have to wait very long either, because shortly there was another knock on the door, and I opened.
Anything other than his silence. But I do remember, while we were in New York, the day we arrived in the night, and you know, it was my first trip to West. Baba knows that. I had to go in 52, but I didn't go. So he remembered that, and while I was attending to spreading out